time to talk about Vevin Song by Jonathan Neves Mayers. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris and today's video is the Vevin Song book review. This was honestly one of the most unique looks at grief in a dystopian setting that I've read in possibly ever, and I'd love to have a chat to you about it today. Before we jump into the review, make sure you check in the description box down below for links to my Discord and social media should you want to come along for the ride. Vevin Song was an utterly captivating dystopian novel full of violent, action-packed sequences with grave consequences, an untrusting found family that had to learn to work together, and some complex but mesmerizing world building. We are thrown into the action as humanity is fleeing under the safety of rainfall. New creatures have come to the world called lightbirds, and they have taken over. They are killing everyone and everything humanity holds dear, but they are allergic to water, so rain is the only time that our human population can escape. Marla, who was just a child when this happened, was saved from a cave. Nothing but a cry heard by chance when Rowan and his family were running to the pods to be shuffled into underwater cocoons to keep them safe from the lightbirds. The human population would now have to live in these cocoons for the remainder of their days under the safety of water. Within these cocoons, when people turn a certain age, they get jobs to do. Marla, who was our baby who was saved when they moved into the cocoons, is unsatisfied. She hates the job that she's been given as teaching more than anything and wants to go back to the surface world to see what it's all about, thinking that it can't be that bad. She has so many unanswered questions, but no one wants to take the time to listen to her until she goes and sprouts wings of her own, very similar to those of the lightbirds they fled many years before. Obviously, this has caused a massive disturbance among those in the cocoon, and she is hunted. With the option of either being experimented on for life or getting the hell out of the cocoon, she chooses the latter and flees back to the mainland in hopes of finding out exactly where she came from. Marla learns more than she bargained for and is being hunted by both the lightbirds, or Vevins as they are actually called, as well as her human counterparts. She will have to think on her feet if she is going to get any answers at all. That is the plot in a nutshell. Like I said earlier, it is fairly unique, and if you read the blurb on the back of the book, you're going to think, hang on, what is this book really about? But no, I promise you, it's worth it, and it is about these lightbirds and the connections that humanity has to them, and it's all done in a very interesting way. I adored a lot about this book. The first thing of note to me personally is going to be the action sequences. So from page 1, the stakes were there, they were high. We're following humanity and these characters as they are desperately trying to flee their precious homes. They don't want to leave, but they have to, because the only way they are going to survive is to get into these manufactured cocoons underwater. And if the rain stops at any point and you can feel your heart rate rising through these scenes, they're not going to make it. But from page 1, we hit the ground running. Literally. The author does a really good job of keeping these stakes high and had me as the reader on my toes until pretty much the end of the book. And these sequences happen throughout, so you're always a little bit like, oh, I'm anxious at a book, but in the best possible way. The number of battles that we got to witness between these two populations, which have not one shred of trust for each other, while also having conversations about things like prior beliefs and how they can affect what we do in our day-to-day, and the power of one person taking a stand, was awe-inspiring, because not only was I entertained, but I was learning and having these conversations internally as I went along with the book. Following on from that, there were a lot of deeper conversations which could be taken through these pages. This is something that I, as a reader, absolutely love. I love when there are thematics throughout the story that make me stop and think. One of my favorite things in reading is that if I need to put a book down after a couple of chapters and really sit with what I've read and think about it, that to me is, inspirational. This author has made me stop and think about something, and that happened here. At some point in the time of getting back to the story, at some point in the timeline of the lightbirds and the timeline of humans, something has stirred inside both parties, saying that maybe we don't have to fight. Maybe we can challenge these ideals that we've had, that the other side tells us is the truth, pins us against each other, that says that violence is the answer. There was so much emotion behind both the humans and the Vevins as we came to know them, and we sort of understood where these beliefs were driven from. This theme played beautifully into how we deal with grief, but also gave us the safety of a fictional lens. Something that stood out to me in particular was the anger that comes from having lost someone dear to you, and that feeling of losing control over something. And at times it really did feel like a descent into chaos that our characters had to scramble to gain control of. And if you've ever lost someone, and it happens to everyone, sometimes there are those emotions where you just don't know what to do, but you also can't control anything, and it does feel like absolute chaos. And that was depicted in such a beautiful way and unpacked in such a beautiful way in this book that, you know, I had to take a couple of times just to really sit with the message that had come through there. Vevin Song offered a lot of these deeper themes throughout all the action, all the character development, all the world building, and I really appreciated exploring these themes throughout the book. Every scene felt like it packed a punch. To keep this review nice and short, I could gush about this book for a little while. The final thing that I'll talk about is the characters themselves. There were a lot of characters in here, and they were all complex in their own way because of these thematics that were being explored, but they were brilliantly executed in my opinion. No one fell short from my opinion as I was reading. The family dynamic in this book is complicated, and it's very, very real. From the father who is so far in the grips of grief that he can barely look at his children after losing his wife, to separate species trying to figure out how not to kill each other, and because that's all they've ever known. Vevin Song offered a look at the best and worst of what people have to offer. Looking at Marla specifically as the main protagonist of this story, she's 20. She's barely an adult who hasn't seen the light of day since she was born. She longs for the surface, but she's stuck in a classroom underwater teaching kids she doesn't even care about, being not more than a child herself. She then goes and numbs the pain with parties and casual intimacies, but she's also really concerned that her father has a meal on the table, knowing that he's just going to drink himself to death if he doesn't. Family, and it was so reminiscent of real life, you know, family, friendships, new species, it's all messy. Life is messy, and that's what makes it beautiful, and this book doesn't shy away from those aspects. I will say, before closing off, this book is not going to be for everyone. So go in knowing that. That's why I talked about the thematics a little bit. It is heavy. It is a heavy book going in. It also has heavy lore behind these belief systems. There's complex family histories that do get explained, and they can feel like lore dumps as we go through in the book throughout its exposition. This can sometimes throw readers out of a story. Personally, for me, I don't mind it. I do like lore dumps if I'm learning about the world, because I can find myself getting lost in it. And there were a couple of times in this book where I did have to stop and reread a paragraph, or I would have to put the book down to think about what I'd read, but I was so invested that I would continue to read the passage, or I would put the book down until I grasped the concept that was being spoken about. So go in knowing that it is fairly heavy. Vevin Song was truly something special, and I can already see this being one of my favorites of 2023 in terms of execution. I have been extremely blessed to have conversations with this author about where the inspiration for this book has come from, which, you know, it has made me more invested in the story. So also go in knowing that that I have had these conversations with the author, and make your own decision from there. But I was blown away, and it was my first 5-star of the year. If you like something a bit heavier and you like to explore some of those darker themes of life throughout your books, this one is going to be one that you want to pick up. Have you read this one? Are you going to pick it up? Let me know in those comments down below. If you like the content, give it one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will. I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.